The night was a shroud, and the road ahead, a ribbon of uncertainties as we drove through the heart of nowhere. The interstate stretched before us, a monotonous line between reality and the realms of the unexplained. It was on this desolate stretch that we encountered the rest stop that wasn't supposed to exist. The air was thick with unease as we pulled into the rest stop, the only sign of civilization in 200 miles. A van full of teenagers, laughter dying on their lips, hurriedly left the place, whispering of an eerie feeling that clung to their skin. In front of us, a small gray car sat idle, its occupants two young men who stood unnaturally still, as if frozen in time. Inside the car, I watched, a silent sentinel as my mom and sister ventured into the dimly lit building. The stillness of the two men outside was unsettling, their silence a stark contrast to the soft hum of the interstate behind us. They were like statues, guardians of a threshold we had unwittingly crossed. When my mom and sister returned, their faces were etched with fear, their steps hurried and frantic. As they dove into the car, the two men turned their heads in unison, their bodies rigid and unmoving. Their eyes were abysses, voids that threatened to swallow the light, the very essence of life itself. We fled, the car's tires screaming against the asphalt as we left the rest stop behind. But the terror followed us, clinging to our thoughts, an unshakable specter. We searched the maps, scoured the internet, questioned the locals, but the rest stop was a ghost, absent from every map, every conversation. It was as if we had touched another dimension, a place that existed between the ticks of the clock, a place that hungered for the weary travelers of the night. The rest stop had vanished, but the memory remained, a haunting melody that played on loop in the darkest corners of our minds. We dared not stop again, not until the safety of the city lights embraced us. But even then, the darkness lingered, a silent reminder that some places are not meant to be found, and some eyes are not meant to be met. The rest stop had become a legend, our own personal ghost story, a chilling testament to the unknown that lies just beyond the veil of reality. I'll never forget that night, the night when the boundaries between the living and the dead seemed to blur into a single, terrifying moment. We were just a bunch of friends out for a thrill, driving through the graveyard in an old Subaru that was more rust than car. It was supposed to be fun, a story to tell with a laugh. But what happened there, it was no laughing matter. We found ourselves by a pond, a still mirror in the growing darkness, and that's when we saw him. A man, or at least the shape of one, sitting across the water. He was draped in shadows, topped with an old-style hat that seemed to drink in the light. We called out, a friendly jest, but he didn't move. Not at first. Then, like a nightmare come to life, he stood and ran across the water towards us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. But he vanished, just like that, halfway across the pond. We ran, stumbling in our fear back to the car, but it wouldn't start. The banging started then, a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. We were trapped, no cell service, no way to call for help. The air grew heavy, pressing down on us with the weight of centuries. Time lost meaning as we tried everything to get the car to start. And then, as sudden as it had all begun, the engine turned over, and we didn't hesitate. We drove out of there like the devil himself was on our heels. The moment we left the graveyard, our phones came back to life, but none of us could shake the feeling that something had followed us out. Something that wasn't human, wasn't an animal, but something else entirely. We never spoke of it again, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear that banging, and I wonder, what was it that came for us in the graveyard? In the quaint town where everyone knows each other's names and stories, the house on Maple Street stood as an enigma. Its walls, steeped in silence, held the echoes of a tale that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to whisper about it. The tragedy of the house was not just a story, it was a palpable presence, a specter of sorrow and rage that lingered in the air. It was into this house that my family moved, unaware of the restless spirit that claimed it as her own. The neighbors, with their furtive glances and somber nods, spoke of the woman who once lived there, a life extinguished by the hands of a cruel and violent husband. Her spirit, they said, bore an undying scorn for men, a fury that transcended death itself. My father, a kind man, was the first to encounter her wrath. Each morning, he'd wake to find fresh scratches adorning his skin, as though thorns had caressed him in his sleep. We searched for reason, for logic, but the house defied such comforts. It seemed to breathe with a life of its own, reacting to our every move with either silence or a scream. My brother, ever the tempest, often clashed with my sister and me. But in that house, his anger was met with retribution. Invisible forces marked him, a testament to the consequences of his actions. Then, one fateful night, he crossed the line, his anger manifesting in a blow to our sister. The recompense was swift, a nosebleed so violent it painted his bed in shades of terror. We lived in the shadow of an unseen fury, each step measured, each breath caught. The house watched, waited, and judged. The day we left, my brother's play turned to pain, a broken arm the final judgment passed. He whispered to me, his voice laced with fear, that he felt her there, a presence that sought not just to punish but to destroy. As we drove away, I cast a final glance at the house. Half expecting to see her silhouette in the window, I saw only the empty gaze of the glass, the curtains fluttering like the wings of a departing soul. The house on Maple Street was quiet now, but the memories of scratches and blood, of an unspoken threat that hung heavy in the air, they remained with us. We learned a harsh truth that day. Some spirits are bound to this world by chains of anger and sorrow, their fury a fire that burns through the veil of death. And as we left Maple Street behind, we carried with us the knowledge that some ghosts, like the woman who haunted our home, are never truly at peace. I remember those days like they were yesterday, standing by my dad's bed in the soft glow of the nightlight. He was really sick, the kind of sick where you know he's not going to get better. The room always smelled like medicine, and the sound of the oxygen machine was like a constant reminder that every breath was a struggle for him. One evening, something strange happened. I felt this cold draft, and turned around to see this dark figure by the door. It was small, but it felt like it filled the whole room with its presence. It was holding onto the door frame so tightly, as if it was trying to be a part of our world. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was looking right at us. I didn't know what to do, so I ran at it, but it just slipped away into the shadows, and when I got there, it was gone. I went back to my dad, trying to tell him what I saw, but I couldn't get the words out right, and he just looked more worried. After that night, we kept seeing it around the house. My mom would catch glimpses of it in the hallway or the kitchen, but it was always quick and it always sent a shiver down your spine. It was like it was watching over my dad, waiting for something. When my dad finally passed away, it was peaceful, like he was just falling asleep. And after he was gone, we never saw that dark figure again. The house felt different, lighter somehow, like whatever was there with us had left too. We still talk about it sometimes, wondering if it was there to protect my dad or to take him away. It's one of those things we'll never really know. But I'll always believe that in those last days, we saw something that was from another place, something that wasn't supposed to be here with us.